Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is J Stamatelos. He is a professional coach who helps people break out of the fear so they can share their gifts with the world. His work focuses on anxious insecurity, a chronic feeling of being not enough, regardless of how much we achieve. He personally has fought this battle, has spent a decade helping those who fight it now, and focuses on evidence based and data informed interventions. Thank you so much for being on People on Data. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing, Will?
I'm good. I'm good. So, Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get here? How did you become a professional coach who wants to help, especially in certain situations, men out? What was your journey like?
Yeah, so I'll give you the shorter version. You can have me expand it if need be. But I actually
Sure.
started my career working in emergency management and counterterrorism.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, I got really interested. I was 15 when 9/11 happened. That had a huge impact on me. And so that shaped everything. And I got very interested in human behavior, particularly around violence. But then as I got older, the world was starting to change. We saw that, 9/11s weren't happening every day. Things were shifting, but I saw this greater pain around me. And around the same time, I had my own breakdown. Just like, so many people today were to the point where I was almost ready to end my life in my early 20s. And luckily, I wasn't alone in that. I had great people around me who were able to give me support, especially men were able to be there for me. And that taught me that one of the biggest problems I had was really this chronic self-rejection I had of myself, that my relationship with myself was founded on ripping myself apart. That's how I kept myself motivated. That's how I kept myself driven to do more things, to always, do what I thought I needed to do. And I had to learn how to cultivate a healthy relationship with myself. And as I started to do this, I started to look around me and saw just how widespread this problem was. I mean, you
Mhm.
could take the impact of terrorism, or you could take the impact of this chronic, what I call anxious insecurity. And the latter was having a far bigger impact on my community. So I became really interested in wondering, well, why do so many of us feel this way? And what can we actually do to change it? And that's defined the last 11 years of my life.
Wow, so that's some type of journey. I mean, geez, that's a movie of the week on Netflix.
Yeah, lots of unexpected turns.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that. So, today's subject is a good one. Why are so many men struggling? And I wanted to like throw in my 2 cents worth, and then
Sure.
obviously you could please jump in. And what I noticed, Jay, is that depending on the age range, like some of my younger friends, and I'm talking about in the mid to late 30s, give or take between
Hmm.
30 and 40, like a lot of them are struggling in more of relationships. Not, it seems like some of these guys can't live up to some of the women that they're interested in the women's standards. They
Right.
want a certain type of guy making this type of money. They want them to be in certain type of jobs, in terms of uh the status that the man might not have, and that's impacting some of these guys. Because when I gone to like singles parties or even sometimes networking events, again, when I'm just talking to them one-on-one, they feel that they can't match up to some of these women's standards. Also, a lot of some of my male friends don't have people that could talk to.
Right.
And I think that's one of I think besides the relationship status with a woman, the second biggest, what I notice is that they don't have someone to talk to. If they're going through some personal stuff, there's not that, whether it's a brother or a best friend, that, sometimes they keeping these feelings in, and it just really screws them over. So, I mean, that's what I've been seeing. Please, am I on the right track on this?
I think it depends on where you're at. I don't know
Okay.
if you go to I different populations. I think different areas have different value sets, and
Right.
status is defined in different ways. So if you're living in an area where status is defined very much through materialistic things, that makes a lot of sense. If you're in another area where maybe status is defined by meeting a certain set of social criteria or
Right.
fitting a certain definition of what a man is, I think it's going to be that. So maybe the way I would reframe this is saying just that there's so many men, especially younger men, who feel like there is a standard they cannot measure up to.
Right.
Whether that's coming from externally or internally. And so that's keeping them in this very chronic state of feeling insecure and very anxious. And then the other side of it, I 1,000% agree with everything you said. Isolation. Isolation has to be the greatest problem facing men today, especially emotional isolation, specifically emotional isolation from our peers, from other
Mm.
men. I almost can't think of a bigger. There are a lot of problems, but of the big ones, that is, man, if it's not number one, it's definitely number two, but I can't think of one to put above it.
And I remember I did an episode on this, and because a friend of mine came up with this when I was employed somewhere else, um, and we were talking about this. Is like, who is your outlet for men?
Right.
Women have each other, all that. And I thought about that. I was like, geez, I mean, I'm lucky that I always had a couple of buddies that I can talk to. I
Right.
can get my, my anger out or whatever. But then I realized, like what you just said, there's not a lot of guys that, maybe they want to keep it in, or they just feel insecure about uh talking about emotional stuff, maybe a bad breakup or a bad thing at work or whatever. um and I think that's such a horrible thing when we don't, some of us don't have someone to talk to. Um, what would be some of the things you would suggest for some of these young guys, especially, when you get older, you hopefully you establish yourself, you have a lot more friendships and all that. But
Hmm.
when you're young in your 20s, 30s, and maybe even 40s, um, how do you get out of that, from inside, where you just say, hey, you know what, let me socialize more, let me meet somebody? Is it a trust issue that it comes down at the end with some of these guys?
I
Sorry,
think,
I was all over the place.
yeah, yeah. No, but they're all good questions. It's yeah. So I think I would split the question, or I would split the problem into two different directions. Do you have good connections externally, and do you have a good connection within? Because the
Mm,
thing is, even if you have someone show up to you externally, if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself and your feelings, I mean, what are you going to tell them? You're going to say something very blanket, like, "Well, I feel bad." And there's so many, because the vast majority of the people I work with are men. Probably, over the past 10 years, I'd say 80% of my clientele has been male. For some guys, they and I was one of these. I had to learn how to feel my feelings.
mm,
I mean, I had to learn that feelings are something that can be felt in the body, that, feeling insecure is different than maybe feeling sad or angry or something like that I could bring nuance to my words, because I needed to have a better emotional vocabulary if I want to get help. If I want to talk to someone and express how I'm feeling, if I just go, "I feel bad," they're going to be like, "Well, I don't, okay. I, I don't, you're not giving me a lot to work off of. I don't know really how to respond with you if so there's the more in touch we are with ourselves, the easier it is for us to communicate with others, let our emotional needs be articulated, have those needs be met, and it just makes life a lot easier. On the other side, unfortunately, we have to, so our ancestors never would have had this problem, the one I'm about to say, which is about being able to have a group of guys that you could go to with problems, because they were always around each other. You were always around other people. The
yeah.
idea of being lonely that would just not make sense. So, but now, because we live in this very individualized world where we're all kind of our own little bubbles, it's just like how our ancestors didn't need to worry about working out or exercising because that was part of life. Likewise, they didn't need to think about socializing because that was part of life.
Like,
We need to go out of our way now in today's world to socialize, especially as men. And part of this is hard because there has been this idea passed that a man is supposed to be a lone wolf.
mm,
And the ridiculous part of that analogy is a person who is a lone wolf would be as successful as a legitimate lone wolf, meaning they would die. We a wolf survives because of the pack. Humans
Right.
survive because of our connections. That is more than anything else what plays a defining role in our life. So we need to find places where we can connect with other men in these ways. I used to run a couple of years ago Pittsburgh's only secular men's group. That was a great experience. I'm part of a men's group now that I like called Everyman, EVRY Man.
Mm-hmm.
It's online and you can go, and it's very much built about around men being vulnerable with each other and learning how to connect with yourself. But whether it's every man or whether it's starting a men's group or joining one in your community, it's we need to seek it out. We need to actively look for people who we can have legitimate conversations with that make us feel vulnerable and where they feel the ability to do the same. Realizing how much strength there is in vulnerability.
And you hit it. I like what you said about joining a group. There's meetup.com. There's,
Yeah,
maybe, and they have a lot of in-person events. Do you think that maybe social media has put a for lack of a better word, a death on socializing personally because
for sure.
everything is texting and I listen. I hate texting. I don't mind if and we're talking with J Stamatelos, and I'm texting Jay, say, "Hey Jay, I'm going to be at the corner at 5 o'clock. I'll meet you there." That's fine. I don't mind doing that. But it seems like it's so impersonal now because it's people are having conversations. Nobody wants to talk on the phone anymore. Because I'm like, if you have a buddy, you could talk on the phone. Maybe if you can't meet him in person. But it seems like social media is really killing this. The Instagram, the Twitters. Maybe that's my take. But please,
Yeah.
what do you
Well,
think?
I mean, you're not going to get much pushback from me. I don't use social media a lot for that. I've never been able to have a healthy relationship with it.
Right.
And so I've had to pull back from it for myself. So I get it. I think something else that I didn't think of until someone pointed this out to me is how we have so few reunions for schools anymore. And they're
Hmm.
like, why? Because you can get on Facebook and you can snoop on each other and you can see your highlight reel there. We don't need to see each other because it's enough. It's like but you're replacing a gourmet meal with fast food. Because
Hmm.
it's not honest connection. Social media, I mean, none of that is real connection. Even if you saw someone at a reunion for 10 years ago and everyone's trying to put on airs, that's not a real thing either. But the point is, you need actual under the surface human interaction. And we need that. And I think social media makes us feel like we have something that we really don't.
No, I like what you said. Well, I'm putting words in your mouth, but let me rephrase it. Like social
Sure.
media is killing the talking.
Yeah.
For like again because uh, and it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day that if certain things are met criteria wise in terms of my business or whatever, that I would cut pretty much 90% of my social media and maybe stay with Facebook only, maybe.
Hmm.
But when I get as they call it, the DMs on Instagram, it's texting. And when I
Yeah.
want to reach out to say, let's have a conversation, I hear crickets in the back. Yeah, I don't hear nothing because it's so impersonal now. And I think for guys, especially the younger guys, like you suggested, go out, meet people, join these groups. And I don't want them to join a Facebook group because it'll be the same thing. You just pretty much typing. But go to meetup group because there's tons of meetup group that have events. I live in New York City. They have events. Hey, we'll meet them in Central Park, or we go apple picking, or we'll do scavenger hunt, whatever it is. I just it seems that I hate to see that the men are struggling because again, whether it's a relationship wise or just the connection with another guy because they don't have anyone to talk to. And I think I repeat, I think social media is really killing the interpersonal relationship of especially men because um there's just not enough of guys to go around to talk to talk to each other. If that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's a major problem. It's actually part of the reason I'm doing podcasts is because, I've tried for years. Well, you need to market yourself and you need to go online and have an Instagram, have this. I've never been able to stay consistent because I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Even if people message me about it, I just don't like it. So I decided what do I want? I want to have actual conversations with people.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm talking with you. That's why this has become the main way I'm engaging with the world. And it's so much more enjoyable to have a good conversation with someone than to get 20 DMs from random people who you probably won't talk to again.
Right. And the thing is too, Jay, um, you don't know how, if you're having a conversation, at least you could hear the tone of their voice, whether they're
Exactly.
happy, they're sad, they're pissed off at you, they're angry at you. Maybe you might not do a video call. Okay, that's fine. But at least with the phone call, you having an actual, you could hear the tone of their voice. In a DM or in a text, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything to me. They can even write anything in capital letters. That doesn't mean shit to me. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I like to have an actual conversation with someone because again, you get to know someone that way. You can hear their voice, whether they're upset or they're pissed off or they're happy. To me, just having this texting thing, I'm not a fan of it. I'm like you. I'm not a fan of it. There'll be a day where I'm going to cut most of this off and maybe just keep Facebook because I could post pictures up or whatever if I can't talk to someone. But in terms of Instagram, Twitter, and I'm not even on TikTok, I'm on those two. But anyway, Jay, sorry, I'm going on a tangent again. So, what are some of the ways? I know you suggested maybe joining a like-minded group. Any other suggestions that you might have for some of the guys to maybe get out of that shell and meet a fellow peer?
Well, I think we could go take a stab almost at dating, right? I mean, we are talking about going out and forming relationships for
Yeah,
most people later on in life. It's not too far from the struggles faced by someone who's looking for love later in life or something
yeah.
like this. And the best advice I've ever heard, at least in my opinion, for me was if you want to meet someone, don't worry about meeting someone. Ask yourself, what things do I like? What do I really enjoy? And how can I do them in a social setting?
Mm,
So that way you're doing something where you're in your element, or you're exploring something that you think you might like maybe, well, I just want to see what it's like for me to try rock climbing. I've never done that before. I want to see what it's like to go on a bike ride or whatever it is. But doing it in a social setting allows you to interact with others, have conversations. One thing leads to another. You might, go out, meet some people, join a tennis meetup. And like this actually happened to someone I know. You go out, join a tennis meetup, and then that takes you to salsa dancing later. Like you have no idea where these things will take you.
right. No, you hit it. To me, I'm a sports guy, so I love baseball and football.
Right.
You go to a local bar. Now, obviously, if you don't drink, maybe that's a bad idea. But if you do like to have a beer or two at a local bar, there's
Right.
plenty of men there that like to have that bond setting. And one of the things, Jay, that I miss of personally of playing sports when I used to play touch football and softball was the camaraderie because before the game started, there'll be a couple of us talking and just shooting the breeze. Then after the game, we're walking home together, whatever. Again, talking the breeze. And then during the winter season, when we played touch football, that was even more bonding because on occasion they would come to my apartment and we watched the football game. So there'll be like 7 or 8 guys drinking beer, just having a great time and just talking, just getting to know each other.
Right.
I don't see that happening anymore. I don't even hear that anymore where guys get together to watch football games anymore. Has that disappeared because again, social media, shyness, maybe people not liking sports like I do as I gotten older.
Well, again, I think it depends on just your group and what you're into and what you do. I mean,
Okay.
I think a lot of I something I found interesting for me was when I was picking myself up from my really difficult times in my early 20s, I started playing pickup soccer 4 times a week.
Mm,
And I found myself becoming I was so much more open and vulnerable with these guys who I really just met than I was with some of my friends who I'd known for a decade.
mm,
And so that camaraderie is a big thing. And one of, so right before we got on the call, we talked about this, and you mentioned books and resources, and one of the books I so heavily recommend for men is the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger. And it's all about the importance of that feeling connections and those bonds. And for him, he's coming at it primarily as someone who was an embedded war reporter. So he went around Afghanistan and
Oh,
he
wow.
experienced these things. And he's talking about, the book is extremely popular with veterans.
Mm.
I do volunteer work. Well, I primarily did it before the pandemic, but volunteer work with Team Rubicon, which is primarily for veterans. And they everyone was into this book, and we talk about it, and it's something that is very much part of the conversation among these people. Is I so miss being in the service because I used to have a sense of belonging and being part of a group, and there's just other people around me. And that's then what happens when you become a true civilian and you're sitting at home by yourself, don't know what to
Yeah.
do, don't have anyone around you. What do you do?
Wow. I never even thought about it that way, especially, people that that served our country, which, I always thank because of what you've done
Right.
and that camaraderie, because there you have each other's back. And
Right.
that's the thing when, and this day and age for us, here in New York City, we have during the summer from April through October, um, there's a group of us that meet to roller skate,
Hmm.
right? And there's maybe five guys, four guys, five guys, six guys, depending. And we have a camaraderie with each other, so that's our outlet to just talk about work or whatever, or maybe maybe we have female problems and we talk to the other guy about it and get their input. Um,
Right.
I think there's opportunities out there for the younger guys to capitalize on, but I'm just afraid that they're so embedded in social media and they feel safe because and I'm talking now in the relationship aspect, where if they get rejected, well, it's online. I didn't meet someone in person. Are you
Mm.
finding that might be also the case where? And let's talk about the relationship with a man or a woman. Is that another thing that maybe some men are afraid of, is to meet someone in person because of maybe a fear of rejection?
Well, I think two things. So one, I don't know that we can social media rejection is for sure real rejection. And there is, people will go through extreme pain because of this. I mean, the amount of anxiety around, a message I send or this, is it taken the right way? Because it is all text based, and
Yeah,
it can cause huge things. And I see that especially with more of my younger clients. And social media, even I'm ripping on it, but I don't know that it deserves a complete blanket blame. I mean, it does also have the power to bring people together, and
right.
it does allow people to form relationships. It's, I think, more of a question: are you using this tool in a way that's helpful, or are you using it in an inappropriate way? Like, just like you said,
Mm,
texting. Like, this is a good tool for maybe sharing small pieces of vital information. It's not maybe the best tool for having a very vulnerable connection. I'd say
right,
the same thing for social media. This can help us maybe establish a relationship, do some things. Like meetup.com is technically social media. We can
right.
use it for a good purpose, but are you going to use that to find someone who you can really pour your soul to? Maybe, but the odds of that are very low, I would guess. And it's going to be a lot easier and less taxing for you to do that in real life. So you want to somehow go from offline to online and practice those skills. We do know that, especially for the younger generations, like, they're having less sex, they're having less relationships. This could absolutely be stress induced. It could highly be because parents are now so much more controlling than they used to be, and
Right.
they simply don't have the means to go, and they don't have anywhere to go. Where would they go? We've taken away so many just open communal spaces where young kids can congregate. That might not be such big of a problem in New York, where you can, everyone's just going to go out in the city.
Yeah.
But in other parts of America, kids have to be driven everywhere, or it's they don't have that same freedom. So I think I'm like half answering your question.
No, 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 no. No,
Yeah,
definitely not half-assed. No, not at all.
yeah,
I get what you're saying. I get, and that's why I'm glad I have you on. We're talking with J Stamatelos, professional coach. Um, Because I never thought about it that way, Jay. Where
Right,
if you're in Iowa and you got to, or in parts of Florida where my sisters used to live, you had to drive everywhere,
right.
and if you're not a driver, then you're kind of screwed. Then you're forced to
Yep.
like meet your neighbors. And I'm looking at it from a New York City point of view where I could just walk out and just start a conversation with someone. But it for someone that's shy, how do you get out of that now? Because let's not even talk about that they might have anxiety, but they're just so shy because they don't know. Maybe they don't have those first words to say to someone like, "Hey, how you doing? How's it going?" Um, have you dealt with clients that might be a little on the
Yeah,
shy side?
I have. And a lot of times, that shyness is coming because they're so self-critical and
Mm,
they're so self-rejecting that they're afraid, well, if anyone else sees me for who I really am, they'll do the same to me. So I have to make sure that doesn't happen. And so we can work through that. But what's really interesting is for a lot of these guys who have that deep insecurity, they have become so self-aware in social settings that they actually have really strong social skills. And because they're watching for cues, they're watching for this, what's this person thinking, what's this person doing, and even though those skills were maybe forged out of pain, they're still skills. And once we can do the healing we need to do, those same skills can be used from a more positive perspective, where you have someone who, like a former client of mine, went from being extremely shy to the point that he could barely talk to anyone unless he knew he was going to talk to them, to like being this very gregarious waiter who would just like sit down with people and joke with them without like warning, and like that they would love it. And he was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I'd say, I totally can believe you're doing this because you have these skills. You're just now using them from a place other than fear. So, and they are skills, and any skill can be learned. It just needs practice. So
and you took the words out of my mouth because I was going to ask you, like, how can someone start using the skills? But you said just practicing and just getting out there and just
it's
saying,
both.
"Whole,
So it's
yeah, go ahead,
both.
please, yeah, go ahead."
Yeah, it's like you need to. I think we want to simultaneously, so what are the skills? Things like really maybe listening more than talking, or maybe just, learning how to take things lightly or make small jokes. Like those are just simple skills that help us connect as people.
Yeah.
At the same time, we want to do the internal work that lowers our inside temperature, that makes us less nervous, less worried that everyone's going to see the flawed person we are, because then if we remove that, then it's so much easier to play with these skills because it turns into more fun. This is more, the risk is lower. I'm not as worried about rejection. I'm not as worried about this. So I'm just going to go out and meet people. And if it goes great, cool. And if it goes bad, that's okay as well.
And a lot
But
of these people have these skills. It's just that they haven't
exactly.
probably, maybe they're not aware that they have them.
What's that? It's there. If you're so fixated, if you are preoccupied by your own insecurity, if you are, if deep down inside you carry a deep fear that who I am is not enough, and no matter what I do, it never seems to be better, that is almost the same as feeling like your house is always on fire. You're
Mm.
always trying to solve that problem. You're always trying to find a way to compensate for this flaw you see inside you, and even it feels like a hamster wheel, and that's where the chronic part of this comes. It chronically feels like you can't get off this, but that can be healed. It usually requires us to work with someone. It usually requires us to do a few different things on our own selves inside, but that can be solved. And then all of those skills, like you said, that exist can now be used in a much easier and much more fluid way.
Wow. I think the biggest thing is about the self rejection, like you mentioned earlier, because again, if you're surrounded by certain people or just you know not giving a shit what somebody says about you, and I was like that too in my 20s, where I cared what people say. It took me to my maybe early 30s, mid 30s, when I'm like, you know what, I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
I mean, because you know what, nobody's paying my rent. I'm paying my rent. I'm paying my bills. So what the hell? And I think some people, some of the men need to do that. And whatever, if a woman rejects them or even a buddy of theirs or whatever, there's always someone else, to me, in my opinion, to take that person's place,
Right.
someone that might be better or anything. Well, first of all, Jay, I want to thank you so much for being on People I'm Dating. I really appreciate it. I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours. Talk more about your coaching, your website.
Sure.
Get
Yeah.
get
So
into that a little bit.
So I call myself, or I think the best way to talk about what I do is I am a self relationship coach. I help people
Mm,
repair their relationship with themselves. And the ultimate goal of that is so they can, one, bring their gifts to the world and be who they are, but two, and maybe even more importantly, they can forge those really true external connections that we talked about.
right.
Because I think we all want to be loved for who we are deep down. Every man, woman, child, just it's human because we crave belonging. And what is more belonging than being loved for who you are? But we can't be loved for who we are until we show up as who we are. And we
Mm,
can't show up as who we are until we're able to take off our own mask. So
wow.
that internal work sets the stage for me for all of those other things we've talked about. And so that is my focus. And I used to be far more because coaching it was originally developed in CBT, so it was very much like we need to change your mindset and things like that. And that is helpful. It will get you to a certain place, but what I found far more effective has been really this more emotional side of it, which was on the one hand maybe self compassion, and that has Kristen Neff and other people have really done a lot of work around this and showing just how important it is. And she has a great book called Self Compassion. And the other big tool I use is IFS, or Internal Family Systems. And there's a great book by Richard Schwartz, who was the person who kind of led this in the 80s, called No Bad Parts, that people could check out too. And that also is like viewing ourselves as having all these different parts of ourselves. So you have an insecure part of yourself, you have a self-critical part of yourself, you have maybe a confident part of yourself, and we want to form healthy connections with all of these, and we can actually heal some of these wounds. So whatever that wound is that causes that chronic feeling of insecurity, you don't have to carry it all the time anymore. We can
Right.
heal that. We can release that. So it's, instead of constantly adding things to your life, let's subtract. Let's ease that burden so you don't have to carry all this weight around. And that's really what's been the focus of my work. It's been so effective. I had no idea this is how my work would end up, but I just
Wow.
kept experimenting over and over again. What gets people results? What gets people results? And this emotional relational model has really seemed to be the thing that is most effective. So that's what I focus on.
Okay, sounds good. And so the books you talked about is Tribe, um, Self Compassion,
Hmm.
and the last one was No Bad Parts.
Correct.
All right. Yeah, I'll definitely put that on the show notes. And if somebody want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
So the best way to get in contact with me is through my website, jamesjstamatelos.com. I assume there'll be a link in the show notes or something like
Sure.
that.
Yeah, definitely there
And
will be. Yeah.
because it's just otherwise just a very long Greek name to remember. But it's, you just come there and shoot me. I have a form there and you can fill it out, and I'd love to hear from you.
No, sounds good. Again, I'll put that in the show notes. Well, anyway, Jay, first of all, again, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Will.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, everyone, that was J Stamatelos, and you can find them at jamesjstamatelos.com. That's jamesjstamatelos.com. Jay, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. Much appreciated. You can find me on peopleondating.com. That's peopleondating.com. Check out our past shows and check out our blog. Also, when you get a chance, please go to iTunes. Find us there, People on Dating. I'm also on Google Podcasts and on Spotify. Also, please go to our YouTube channel, People on Dating. Please subscribe, leave a review, share it, please, please, please. Anyway, guys, on behalf of People on Dating, I'm Will Morales. Until next time, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And remember, it's just a conversation, no judgment. Bye.